"You're fired." The manager's furious voice sliced through the restaurant's elegant hum. He pointed a shaking finger directly at the young waitress, her face pale with shock, her only visible offense, the simple silver pendant gleaming beneath her uniform collar. She pleaded, her voice trembling, barely audible amidst the sudden tense silence. "Please, I need this job." But his face remained a mask of cold cruelty. Nearby, seated alone at a table overlooking the city lights, a powerful silver-haired man watched the public humiliation unfold. His expression was intense, unreadable. His gaze fixed not on the angry manager, but on the waitress, and the pendant she desperately clutched. What secret did that piece of silver hold? Why was this ruthless manager so enraged by it? And why did this watchful billionaire seem so profoundly invested in the fate of a simple waitress about to lose everything? The Seattle skyline wept against the panoramic windows of Lumiere, each raindrop tracing a path down the glass like a silver tear. Inside, however, was a world insulated from the gloom. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, expensive glow across polished marble floors, reflecting the hushed clinking of silverware on porcelain, and the low, self-assured murmur of the city's elite fortunes were discussed over meticulously plated entrees, deals sealed over glasses of vintage wine. It was a sanctuary of opulence, a stage where wealth performed its nightly ritual. And like all grand stages, it required its shadows. The waitstaff moved through the golden light with practiced invisibility, their presence essential, but seldom acknowledged. Among them, Ava Moreau navigated the intricate dance with a quiet grace that belied the ache in her 20-year-old bones. 14 hours into her shift, the fluid movements required, balancing trays laden with Pellegrino and petite appetizers, were fueled by sheer will more than energy. Her black uniform was immaculate, her chestnut hair secured in a tight bun, though one stubborn curl insisted on escaping, clinging damply to her cheek. Hidden beneath the stiff collar of her uniform, resting coolly against her skin, lay her secret, a pendant. A delicate crescent moon, wrought in aged silver, etched with intricate swirling vines that seemed to hold whispers of forgotten lullabies. It was her only tangible link to a life she couldn't recall, a fragile tether to the before the gates of the orphanage, before the blur of foster homes, where kindness was a rationed commodity. She remembered only fragments of being 5, the scent of pine needles in damp woods, a flash of laughter that felt like sunshine, then emptiness, and the pendant tucked securely inside her shirt when she was found cold and alone. It was her anchor in the relentless current of her life, a silent promise that she hadn't simply materialized out of thin air. Her manager, Marcus Thorne, moved through the dining room like a shark patrolling its territory. His slicked-back hair gleamed under the chandeliers, his tailored suit sharp enough to cut. He missed nothing. A slightly crooked fork, a water glass less than full, a smile deemed insufficiently deferential. His corrections were delivered in low, stinging tones that left welts on the spirit. Ava had learned early on to keep her head down, her movements precise, her thoughts carefully guarded. Jobs like this, jobs that paid enough to keep her cramped studio apartment and cover the occasional community college class, were precarious treasures for someone like her. Someone without a net. Tonight, Mr. Henderson at table 7 was particularly demanding. He waved Ava over with an impatient flick of his wrist. "Young lady, this water," he declared, pushing the glass towards her. As if it contained poison, is at best tepid. I specifically requested ice cold, 10 degrees Celsius, precisely. "Is that truly so difficult?" Ava maintained her professional smile, the one she practiced in her cracked bathroom mirror. "My apologies, sir. I'll bring you a fresh glass immediately. As she turned away, a fleeting thought, dry and weary, flickered through her mind. Right, because the world might actually spin off its axis if your water isn't scientifically calibrated. It was a tiny internal rebellion, a spark of the wit she rarely let surface here. It was then, as she navigated back towards the service station, that a new guest was being seated, at table 12, a prime spot overlooking the glittering, rain-slicked city. He entered not with a flourish, but with a quiet gravity that commanded attention more effectively than noise ever could. He appeared to be in his late 50s, his hair a distinguished silver, his bearing erect. His charcoal suit was impeccably cut, yet understated, the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to shout its worth. Piercing blue eyes surveyed the room, seeming to absorb everything without lingering anywhere too long. There was an air of profound stillness about him, yet beneath it a current of restless energy. This was Julian Devereux, founder and driving force behind Devereux Enterprises, a name synonymous with innovation and staggering wealth in the renewable energy sector. He was a titan of industry, a man whose decisions shaped skylines and economies. But tonight he wasn't here for business. The usual armor of command seemed subtly lowered, revealing something more vulnerable beneath. He sought anonymity, perhaps a place to escape the relentless ghosts of his own past, ghosts that whispered a name he rarely dared to speak aloud. Isabella, his daughter, lost 15 years ago, swallowed by the dense green woods during a 5th birthday party, vanished. Ava approached his table notepad in hand, her weary smile automatically clicking into place. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Lumiere. May I get you something to drink while you look over the menu?" Julian Devereux looked up, and in that instant, the carefully constructed world of Lumiere, with its hushed tones and golden light, seemed to tilt on its axis. His gaze sharp and assessing just a moment before snagged on something at the base of her throat as her collar shifted slightly with her movement. The faint gleam of aged silver, a crescent moon entwined with delicate vines. Time stopped. The clink of silverware faded, the murmur of conversation dissolved into white noise. Julian froze, his breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his lips. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat, against the sudden roaring silence in his ears. It couldn't be. It was a trick of the light, a phantom conjured by 15 years of unrelenting grief. Pendants like that. Others could exist. It was a coincidence, a cruel, impossibly cruel coincidence, but his eyes betrayed him. They locked onto the pendant, tracing the familiar, intricate pattern he knew as well as his own reflection. He had commissioned it himself, a unique piece for his bright-eyed, laughing Isabella on her 5th birthday. "This is yours, my little moonbeam," he'd whispered as he fastened it around her neck that morning. "It'll always bring you back to us." Ava, oblivious to the cataclysm unfolding within the man before her, shifted slightly, waiting patiently for his order. She saw only an intensely focused gaze, perhaps a sign of a discerning, potentially difficult customer. She braced herself. Julian forced words past the constriction in his throat, his voice huskier than usual. "Sparkling water, please." He couldn't tear his eyes away from the pendant. It pulsed with a significance that defied logic, a beacon shining through the fog of years. He felt a tremor start in his hands, the same tremor that seized him during sleepless nights, spent staring at the single worn photograph he kept hidden in his wallet. He managed a curt nod as Ava placed the water before him. As she offered the leather-bound menu, his gaze darted again to the pendant, then flickered up to her face, searching her hazel eyes, the curve of her cheek. Was there could there be? The pendant. He heard himself say, the words quiet, but charged with an intensity that made Ava pause, her hand hovering over the menu she was about to leave. It's very unique. Where did you get it? Ava's hand instinctively went to her collar, a protective gesture. Her brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of caution in her eyes. This wasn't the usual small talker. I don't remember, sir, she replied softly, her voice low. They told me at the orphanage. It was tucked into my shirt when I was found. It's the only thing I have from before orphanage. Found. The words slammed into Julian like physical blows. His carefully controlled facade threatened to shatter. He saw the flicker of old pain in her young eyes, the guarded vulnerability. It mirrored the ache in his own soul. He needed to know more, yet pushing too hard, too fast, could frighten her away. As Ava retreated towards the kitchen, Julian watched her go, his mind racing his heart, a battlefield of hope and despair. It was impossible. It was improbable. But as the silver crescent caught the light one last time, before disappearing behind her uniform collar, an undeniable conviction settled deep within him. An echo from the past, too clear, too resonant to ignore. He would not let this go. He could not let this go. The long-buried path might finally be revealing itself, shimmering faintly in the opulent light of Lumiere. The air in Lumiere crackled with an unspoken tension. Julian Devereux remained at his table, his meal forgotten, his gaze fixed on Ava as she moved through the room. He replayed her words, orphanage, found, only thing I have. Each syllable resonated with the hollow ache of his own long years of searching, of hoping against hope. He felt poised on the edge of a precipice, the ground beneath him unstable. Marcus Thorne, ever vigilant, noticed the billionaire's unwavering attention directed at his waitress. Thorne's eyes narrowed. He disliked anything that disrupted the precise, hierarchical order of his dining room, especially attention lavished on someone like Moreau, insignificant, disposable. And Devereux's intense focus felt like a challenge, an intrusion. Perhaps sensing Julian's earlier query about the pendant, Thorne's simmering resentment towards Ava found its flashpoint. As Ava passed near table 12, carrying a cleared tray, Thorne intercepted her, his voice deliberately loud enough to carry slicing through the ambient murmur. Moreau, that necklace. We're not discussing this again. Ava froze the clatter of plates on her tray, suddenly deafening in the ensuing silence. Heads began to turn, mister. Thorne, she began softly. As I said, it's tucked away. Tucked away. Thorne scoffed, stepping closer, invading her space. His voice dripped with contempt. I see it, and more importantly, he sees it. He flicked his eyes towards Julian, a sneer twisting his lips, trying to attract attention. Are we thinking a cheap trinket will get you noticed by the high rollers? Ava flushed humiliation, washing over her in a hot wave. No, sir, it's not like that. It's mine. It means something to me. Means something. Thorne laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Don't make me laugh, Moreau. I know exactly where you came from. Straight out of the system, weren't you? A foster kid bounced from place to place. That thing is probably stolen, just like I imagine. Half the silverware you handle wishes it could be. The cruelty of the words struck Ava like a physical blow. Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely, clutching the tray tighter. It's not stolen, she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. It was given to me. Given to you by who, Santa Claus? Thorne sneered. You're pathetic and you're insubordinate. I told you to remove it. You refused. You're fired, Moreau. Pack your pathetic little belongings and get out of my restaurant. Now panic seized Ava cold and absolute. Losing this job meant losing everything. Her apartment, her classes, the fragile foothold she'd managed to carve out for herself. Please, she choked out the professional mask, crumbling. Mr. Thorne, I need this job. I can't lose it. Please don't do this. Thorne merely smirked, enjoying her desperation. Should have thought of that before you decided. Company policy didn't apply to little orphans like you. Before Thorne could utter another venomous word, a chair scraped against the marble floor. Julian Devereux rose, slowly, deliberately to his full height. The quiet authority that clung to him seemed to expand, filling the space, silencing the whispers that had started around the room. Is there a problem here? Julian asked, his voice, calm level, yet carrying an unmistakable edge of steel that cut through Thorne's bluster. Thorne, momentarily thrown off balance by the billionaire's intervention, quickly recovered his swagger, though a flicker of unease crossed his face. Mr. Devereux, just handling a disciplinary issue with an employee, nothing for you to concern yourself with. Julian's gaze shifted from Thorne's flushed face to Ava's pale, tear-streaked one, lingering on the faint outline of the pendant beneath her collar. Then back to Thorne. A disciplinary issue, he repeated, his tone dangerously soft. Publicly humiliating and firing a young woman seems rather excessive. Especially over a piece of jewelry, Thorne bristled. She's insubordinate and likely a thief. This is my restaurant to manage, sir. Is it? Julian tilted his head slightly. He pulled out his phone, his movements, economical and precise. He tapped the screen, then lifted it to his ear. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. James. Julian said into the phone, his voice crisp and clear. Contact the ownership group of Lumiere Seattle. Immediately inform them. Julian Devereux is prepared to make an offer to acquire the establishment outright. Tonight. Have the preliminary documents drawn up within the hour. He disconnected the call, his eyes never leaving Thorne's face. The manager's jaw had gone slack, his complexion draining to a pasty white. The air crackled. Julian took a step closer to Ava, his gaze softening as he addressed her. Ignoring the stunned Thorne completely. You said it was given to you, he said, his voice gentler now, filled with a raw, hopeful tremor. You said you were found. At an orphanage? Ava nodded numbly. Tears finally spilling over tracing paths down her cheeks. Slowly, deliberately, Julian reached into his inner jacket pocket. His hand trembled slightly as he withdrew an old, worn leather wallet. From it he extracted a photograph, its edges softened with time and handling. It showed a little girl no older than 5, beaming with unrestrained joy, her hazel eyes sparkling. Clutched in her small hand, and also gleaming around her neck, was a silver crescent moon, pendant, identical in every intricate detail to the one hidden beneath Ava's uniform. He held the photograph out to Ava, his voice barely a whisper, thick with 15 years of suppressed emotion. Do you recognize this little girl? Ava took the photo, her fingers brushing his. Her breath hitched. She stared at the image, at the laughing eyes, so much like her own, reflected in mirrors at the impossibly familiar pendant. A sob escaped her lips, a raw sound torn from the depths of her soul, memories fragmented and fleeting, pine trees' laughter, a feeling of safety, surged through her. That's... She gasped, tears blurring the image. That's... me. Julian's knees nearly buckled. The carefully constructed dam holding back years of grief and desperate hope finally broke Isabella. He breathed the name, a prayer, a miracle on his lips. His eyes filled with an ocean of unshed tears locked with hers. My Isabella, you're my daughter." Confusion warred with burgeoning recognition on Ava's face. "No, my name is Ava. I don't understand." But Julian was already closing the small distance between them. He hesitated for only a heartbeat, then pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, his own frame trembling. "You're Isabella Devereux," he choked out, burying his face in her hair, the scent of her chasing away the ghosts. "You've always been my daughter. We never stopped looking." Never. The restaurant erupted in gasps and frantic whispers, but Ava barely heard them. She clung to Julian, sobbing uncontrollably, the solid reality of his embrace anchoring her against the bewildering tidal wave of emotion. The silver pendant pressed between their chests felt warm, a bridge across the abyss of lost time. Thorne, reeling and desperate, tried to interject. "This is absurd. She's lying, sir. She's a nobody, Enough, Julian snapped his voice, cracking like a whip, his eyes blazing as he momentarily looked over Isabella's shoulder at the manager. Just then, the main doors of Lumiere swung open, and two uniformed police officers entered briskly their presence, silencing the room completely. They headed directly towards Thorne, clearly summoned by Julian's efficient assistant during the earlier call. Thorne's protests died in his throat as the officers efficiently handcuffed him, reading him his rights regarding theft and potential workplace harassment charges Julian intended to pursue. As he was led away, pale and sputtering, one of the other waitresses leaned towards her colleague, whispering almost inaudibly, "Finally, that slicked-back hair is going to see the inside of a holding cell." But Isabella, Ava, was barely aware of Thorne's ignominious exit. Her entire universe had contracted to the circle of her father's arms, the worn photograph clutched in her hand, and the steady beat of his heart against her ear. 15 years of emptiness, of questions, of aching loneliness. Suddenly overwhelmed by a flood of impossible truth, she was home. Or perhaps the long, arduous journey home had just begun. The transition from the raw public chaos of Lumiere to the hushed grandeur of the Devereux estate on Bainbridge Island felt like stepping through a rip in reality. Isabella sat beside Julian in the back of a luxury sedan, the city lights blurring into streaks across the rain-lashed windows as they crossed the Sound by ferry, then drove through imposing wrought-iron gates. She felt swept along by a current too strong to fight adrift in a life that felt borrowed, unreal. The sheer scale of the waterfront mansion, all glass walls reflecting the stormy grey water and towering cedars, was breathtaking but deeply intimidating. It whispered of a history, a lineage, a world utterly alien to the cramped studios and shared rooms that had defined her existence. A hushed efficiency marked their arrival. Staff materialized silently to handle luggage. Isabella didn't possess their professionalism, a stark contrast to the forced deference she'd endured and performed at Lumiere. Julian led her inside, his hand resting gently on her back, a grounding presence in the echoing marble foyer, when a housekeeper showed Isabella to the room prepared for her, a suite larger than her entire previous apartment, with panoramic views of the churning Sound. She could only stare, overwhelmed. She sank onto the edge of a plush, king-sized bed, murmuring softly to herself, "Right this room. It's bigger than my old apartment building's entire first floor. Getting from the bed to the closet might require GPS." A tiny, bewildered smile touched her lips before quickly fading. Waiting in the main living area, a vast space, softened by plush furnishings and warmed by a crackling fireplace, was Eleanor Devereux. Isabella recognized her instantly from the faded photograph Julian carried, yet the real woman possessed a fragile strength the photo hadn't captured. elegant, composed with Julian's striking blue eyes, but etched with the fine lines of sorrow held tight for 15 years. The moment Eleanor saw Isabella, the carefully maintained composure dissolved. Time collapsed. With a choked cry, Eleanor rushed forward, pulling Isabella into a fierce embrace that spoke of years of aching emptiness, of prayers whispered into the dark. Isabella, she wept, clinging to her daughter as if she might vanish again. "Oh, my baby, you're home. You're finally home." Isabella clung back, overwhelmed by the sheer force of this maternal love, so desperately longed for, yet so foreign. It felt like a phantom limb. Later, Eleanor led her to a room left untouched, a nursery frozen in time. Small rocking horse shelves lined with picture books. A faded teddy bear clutched tight in Eleanor's hand. "I never gave up hope." Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Every night I prayed you were safe, that somehow, someday." Gathered later, the initial story tumbled out, pieced together through Julian's clipped sentences and Eleanor's tearful recollections. The birthday party in the woods near their old property, hide and seek, a miscommunication, a delayed realization she was missing, the frantic, widening search, police volunteers, private investigators, years of false leads, crushing disappointments. The custom-made pendant, shown in every flyer, their only unique identifier, had yielded nothing. They spoke of how someone, they still didn't know who or why, must have found her wandering, and instead of contacting authorities, inexplicably left her on the doorstep of the foster home, hours away, erasing her past. Isabella listened, absorbing the narrative of the life she should have had, the love that had desperately searched for her gratitude, warred with a profound sense of dislocation, while Julian spoke of mobilizing resources, a flash of memory. Harsh words from a foster mother about wasting food made her flinch inwardly at the lavish spread of snacks laid out before them. The quiet deference of the staff felt unnerving, a stark contrast to the invisibility she'd cultivated for survival. A part of her felt like an imposter, waiting to be found out, waiting for this dreamlike reality to dissolve. This castle wasn't hers. It belonged to Isabella, the ghost girl in the photograph, not Ava, the survivor. In the days that followed, Julian and Eleanor tried with aching sincerity to bridge the 15-year chasm. There were moments of warmth, flickers of connection. Julian attempting to recreate a simple macaroni and cheese dish Isabella had apparently loved as a child, managed to spectacularly burn it, filling the state-of-the-art kitchen with smoke. Eleanor, arriving to the smell, couldn't help but tease, gently dusting flour off Julian's expensive shirt. "Darling, you orchestrate multi-billion-dollar energy deals across continents, but you surrender to boxed pasta." Isabella had offered a genuine small laugh, then seeing the sheepish look on her powerful father's face. Another time, presented with a potential schedule involving tutors, therapists, and social engagements. Isabella felt her head spin. Looking at the complex chart Julian's assistant had prepared, she quipped, trying to lighten the sudden pressure. "I think I might need an assistant, just to keep track of all the assistants." Julian had chuckled, but the underlying message was clear. This new life, however well-intentioned, was overwhelming. Julian moved swiftly to rectify the wrongs at Lumiere Investigations, confirmed Thorne's long-term embezzlement and abusive practices. He was facing serious charges. The stolen tips were repaid with hefty compensation. New ethical management was installed, and Julian, guided by a quiet suggestion from Isabella about fairness, established better working conditions and benefits for the staff. He poured resources into ensuring Isabella had everything she could possibly need: access to the best doctors, therapists, university advisors, a wardrobe instantly filled with clothes she felt awkward wearing. He was trying to fix the unfixable past with the tools he understood: money and decisive action. A fragile sense of rhythm began to emerge. Shared meals, tentative conversations, walks along the blustery shoreline. Isabella started looking at university brochures, the idea of studying social work, helping kids like she had been, taking root. A semblance of peace began to settle over the grand house. Then, one crisp afternoon, the mail arrived. Among the glossy catalogues and business correspondence was a plain, cheap-looking envelope. No return address, addressed simply to Isabella Beaumont, a name she was still struggling to fully inhabit, in jagged, aggressive handwriting that seemed clawed onto the paper. Feeling a prickle of unease, Isabella carried it into the living room where Julian and Eleanor were reading. She slit it open with a silver letter opener that felt unnaturally heavy in her hand. Inside was a single sheet of plain paper, folded once. On it, scrawled in the same jagged hand, were chilling words. The pendant was meant to stay lost. You don't belong here. Leave before you ruin everything. Isabella stared at the words, the ink seeming to bleed malice. The air grew cold. She looked up her face, pale, and silently handed the note to Julian. He read it, his expression hardening into disbelief, then cold fury. Eleanor leaned over his shoulder, her hand flying to her mouth, a sharp gasp escaping her lips. The fragile peace of their fractured homecoming shattered. The relief of reunion was instantly tainted by a cold new fear. It wasn't just that she had been lost. It seemed someone had wanted her to stay lost. And now they knew she was back. The shadows of the past weren't just memories. One of them had just reached out with a chilling threat. The anonymous letter lay on the polished surface of the antique desk in Julian's study, like a viper coiled to strike. The initial shock had given way to a chilling determination within the Devereux household. Fear mingled with fury. Fear for Isabella's safety. Fury at the cowardly malice directed towards her. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached for Isabella's, her grip fierce and protective. Julian, pacing before the rain-streaked windows, stopped abruptly. "This changes nothing," he declared, his voice tight with resolve, "except that we accelerate finding the truth. All of it." He turned his gaze, settling on Isabella. "Whoever did this, whoever might still wish you harm, will be found. I promise you that." He picked up his secure phone line. "James, get me Olivia Vance. Tell her it's urgent. Spare no expense." He listened for a moment, then added, "Yes, that, Olivia Vance." The best. Olivia Vance arrived the following afternoon, cutting through the estate's opulent atmosphere like a cool, clean blade. She was sharp-featured, dressed in practical, well-tailored trousers and a blazer, her observant grey eyes missing nothing. She carried an air of focused competence, utterly unfazed by the Devereux name or the grandeur of her surroundings. In Julian's study, she listened intently as Julian, Eleanor, and Isabella recounted the entire story. The disappearance 15 years ago, the fruitless search, the pendant, the miraculous reunion at Lumiere, and now the venomous letter. Olivia took sparse notes, her questions precise, cutting through emotion to reach the core facts. She examined the letter, bagged securely with meticulous care. 15 years is a cold trail, Olivia stated calmly when they had finished her pragmatism, a stark contrast to the family's raw emotion. But not impossible. The original incident, being left at the foster home, is where we start. Someone found Isabella. Someone chose anonymity over reporting a found child. That choice is significant. She glanced at the file Julian had already compiled on Robert Miller, the disgruntled ex-employee. Mr. Miller is certainly a person of interest, given the timing and his known grievances. His instability is a flag. Then a hint of dryness entered her tone as she surveyed the sheer luxury around her, although intense resentment towards extreme wealth isn't exactly a rare psychological profile. Isabella, who had been listening quietly, spoke up, her voice clear despite the tremor beneath it. "I want to help Miss Vance. I need to be involved. This is my life we're talking about." Julian started to protest, protectiveness flaring, but Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. Olivia regarded Isabella thoughtfully. "Your perspective could be invaluable. Isabella memories feelings, details others might dismiss. But it won't be easy, I know," Isabella said, meeting Olivia's direct gaze. "I'm ready." The investigation began methodically. Olivia, with the vast resources Julian placed at her disposal, delved into cold case files, cross-referenced orphanage intake records from 15 years ago, searched for any reports of lone children found near the woods around the time Isabella vanished. Simultaneously, she dug deeper into Robert Miller's life after his termination from Devereux Enterprises. His trail was erratic. Financial records showed periods of unemployment punctuated by low-wage jobs. He moved frequently. Olivia uncovered whispers of paranoia, of alcohol abuse, of Miller blaming Julian Devereux for every misfortune in his life. The trail eventually led them, Olivia and Isabella, side by side, to Portland, Oregon, a city gritty and grey compared to the polished sheen of Isabella's new life. Following Miller's last known movements, took them to a run-down motel on the city's outskirts, the kind of place where shadows lingered long after checkout. As they navigated the slightly grimy streets, Isabella looked around, a strange mix of familiarity and distance washing over her. "Feels a bit more like my old neighborhoods than, well, home," she admitted quietly to Olivia. Olivia offered a rare, faint smile. "Luxury has its place, I suppose. But the truth often prefers dive motels." The motel room Miller had occupied months ago was empty, stripped bare, smelling faintly of stale cigarettes and desperation. It seemed like another dead end until Olivia's methodical search uncovered a loose floorboard beneath the worn carpet. Tucked underneath was a cheap, spiral-bound notebook, Robert Miller's journal. They sat in Olivia's rental car, the rain drumming on the roof as Isabella hesitantly opened it. The pages were filled with jagged, angry script, rants against Julian paranoid delusions, self-pity. But then an entry leapt out, dated shortly after Isabella's disappearance. "The pendant. Shouldn't have let her keep it. It connects everything. She can never know what it means, who she is. It will ruin them, it will ruin me. Have to make sure it stays buried." Isabella's blood ran cold. The pendant wasn't just a keepsake, it was a key, a danger Miller had recognized. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. What had he been so afraid of? Further entries were more fragmented, but Olivia, cross-referencing names mentioned obscurely in the journal with Miller's known associates, and family records found a crucial link: an estranged sister, Margaret Miller, currently residing in a long-term care facility back in Seattle. The nursing home was clean, but smelled faintly of antiseptic and institutional sadness. Margaret Miller was a frail woman, her eyes large and haunted, in a face etched with worry. She was initially guarded, fearful, when Olivia introduced herself and mentioned Robert, my brother. "He had his troubles," Margaret whispered, twisting her thin hands in her lap. "He passed away 2 years ago. Complications from pneumonia. He He wasn't always rational. Olivia began gently asking about Robert's life. His feelings towards the Devereux family, Margaret, offered vague, protective answers. It was Isabella who broke through. She sat beside Margaret, speaking softly. Not of investigations, but of loneliness, of feeling lost, of how sometimes families are complicated, and love gets tangled with pain. She didn't share details, but her quiet empathy, born of her own fractured past, seemed to reach the older woman. Tears welled in Margaret's eyes. Hesitantly at first, then, in a flood of guilt and sorrow, held back for years, the confession poured out, Robbie. He wasn't evil. Margaret sobbed, her voice raspy. He was broken. After his own little girl died, something in him just shattered. He lost his job at Devereux. Enterprises blamed Mr. Devereux for everything. He was drowning in bitterness. She recounted Robert's desperate, ill-conceived plan. Kidnap the Devereux girl, demand a ransom that would set him up for life. Make Julian pay. But then, in the woods, holding a terrified 5-year-old, Isabella clutching her moon pendant, he saw the ghost of his own lost daughter. He couldn't do it. Margaret wept. He said, looking at her, it broke what was left of his heart. He wasn't a monster. Not really. He just wanted her safe. Anonymous. He drove for hours, left her at that home. Thought the pendant wouldn't mean anything without context. He lived with that guilt every single day. It ate him alive. Isabella listened, stunned into silence, a complex mix of pity and revulsion swirling within her. But Margaret wasn't finished. Her voice dropped lower, filled with a different kind of fear. He wasn't alone in his anger, you see. There was someone who fed it, whispered ideas in his ear. She hesitated, glancing fearfully towards the door. Genevieve Martel, Mrs. Devereux's cousin. The name hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Genevieve always resented the Devereux. Margaret continued, twisting her hands. Their money, their perfect life. She felt overlooked, slighted. She knew Robbie was unstable, angry. She encouraged him, planted the idea of the kidnapping, maybe half joking at first, framing it as balancing the scales. But when Robbie actually did it, she panicked, cut off all contact, vanished from his life. Robbie was terrified she'd expose him if he ever tried to come forward or contact the family. Margaret looked directly at Isabella, then her eyes pleading for understanding. He died alone, carrying that secret, terrified of her. Isabella felt nauseous, Genevieve, her mother's cousin, someone who had likely smiled at her, welcomed her home while harboring this monstrous secret. The betrayal was staggering, intimate, cutting, deeper than any stranger's malice could. Olivia Vance remained composed, her expression unreadable, but her eyes held a new, steely focus. The ghost wasn't just Robert Miller's remorse. The real phantom, the architect of 15 years of pain, had a name, a face, and was woven into the very fabric of the family Isabella had just found. The revelation hung heavy in the air of the Devereux mansion, thicker and more suffocating than the persistent Seattle drizzle outside Genevieve Martel family. The betrayal felt intimate, a venom injected directly into the bloodstream. Isabella paced the length of the vast living room, the plush carpet silencing her footsteps. Anger warred with a sickening sense of pity for Robert Miller, a broken man manipulated, and a profound confusion. How could someone smile at family gatherings while harboring such darkness? Eleanor's reaction was different. The fragile hope that had illuminated her features upon Isabella's return had solidified into something colder, harder. The deep well of her grief now seemed overlaid with ice. She sat perfectly still, staring into the fireplace, her teacup untouched on the table beside her. Later that evening, she found Julian in his study, the incriminating journal lying open on his desk. I remember, Eleanor said, her voice low and devoid of its usual warmth when Genevieve lost her first investment. She came to us crying about misfortune. You helped her then, Julian. You offered guidance, support. She took it, smiled, and apparently resented us for being in a position to help. She traced the rim of her teacup. All these years, her Christmas cards, her polite inquiries, hollow, all of it. The hurt in her voice was profound, the disillusionment absolute. She didn't just enable a crime against our daughter, Julian. She poisoned 15 years of memory. The following morning, Olivia Vance delivered her final report. Genevieve Martel is living under the name Eleanor Vance, ironically enough, in a small coastal town in Oregon. Olivia stated, placing several folders on the table. She purchased a cottage there shortly after cutting ties with Robert Miller. Olivia then presented her findings on the anonymous letter. We lifted a partial print from the adhesive on the envelope flap. It matches Genevieve Martel. Furthermore, digital forensics recovered search queries from a burner laptop registered under her alias, searching for news reports on Julian Devereaux Lumiere purchase. Shortly before the letter was postmarked, the handwriting analysis is conclusive. She sent it. The mystery of the letter was solved, its motive laid bare. Pure panicked malice aimed at scaring Isabella away before her presence could somehow expose Genevieve's own complicity. A heavy silence settled over the room. Then Julian looked at Eleanor, then at Isabella. We face her. He said, his voice quiet but unyielding, together. Eleanor nodded, a flicker of fierce determination in her eyes. Isabella took a deep breath, steeling herself. Confronting the woman who had orchestrated the loss of her childhood felt terrifying but necessary. The final ghost needed to be faced. The drive south to Oregon was tense, filled mostly with silence, as each wrestled with their own thoughts. Rain lashed against the windows, mirroring the turmoil within. As they neared the coastal town, winding through scenic but somber forests. Julian glanced at Eleanor, then Isabella, a grim attempt at levity in his voice. Well, he murmured dryly, let's just hope dear cousin Genevieve doesn't actually keep poisonous snakes as pets. The weak joke hung in the air, doing little to ease the tension, but acknowledging the bitter absurdity of their mission. Genevieve Martel's cottage was deceptively charming. Weathered shingles, a small garden fighting against the coastal wind. It projected an image of quiet, unassuming retirement. When Genevieve opened the door to their knock, her face registered shock, then morphed rapidly into a mask of guarded fear. She had aged, her face lined, but the calculating intelligence in her eyes was still visible. Eleanor, Julian, and Isabella. Genevieve stammered, clutching the doorframe. What a surprise, may we come in? Genevieve Julian's voice was level, leaving no room for refusal. Inside the cottage was tidy, but felt stiflingly small. After the expansive Devereaux estate, Genevieve offered platitudes, flustered attempts at normalcy, but the air was thick with unspoken accusations. Isabella stepped forward, her voice quiet but steady, cutting through the pretense. We spoke with Margaret Miller. She stated simply. Genevieve flinched as if struck. The color drained from her face. Margaret, that woman is delusional, confused. She told us everything, Genevieve. Isabella continued, holding her gaze. About Robert, about his plan, about his regret, and about you, about how you fed his resentment, how you encouraged him, how you panicked and abandoned him when he actually went through with it, It wasn't like that, Genevieve cried, twisting her hands. It was just talk, idle speculation. Robert was unstable, obsessed. He acted on his own. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice colder than the Oregon rain. Did he act on his own when he kept your secret all those years? Genevieve, did he act on his own when he died alone, consumed by the guilt you helped plant in his mind? We were family, I trusted you. You sat at our table, you mourned with us all while knowing her voice broke slightly laden with 15 years of unknowing betrayal. And then Olivia Vance stepped forward, coolly placing a file on the small coffee table. There's the matter of this. She opened it to reveal the forensic report on the anonymous letter. Your print, Genevieve, your digital trail searching for news of Isabella's return right before you tried to scare her away again. Shall I continue? Genevieve stared at the report, her facade finally crumbling completely. Sobs racked her body. The confession came in broken, self-pitying pieces, the corrosive envy of their wealth, the bitterness over perceived slights from years ago, the casual cruelty of suggesting the kidnapping, the terror when it became real, the desperate fear of exposure that led her to send the letter. It was a portrait of a small soul, consumed by resentment. As Genevieve wept, Olivia Vance made a quiet call. Within minutes, the flashing lights of local police cruisers painted the cottage walls red and blue. Olivia had alerted them beforehand, providing corroborating evidence. An officer stepped inside, accompanied by a plainclothes detective holding legal documents. Genevieve Martel, also known as Eleanor Vance. The detective began formally. You are being detained in connection to witness tampering conspiracy and potential accessory charges related to the disappearance of Isabella Devereux 15 years ago. Another document was served. Notice of a civil suit filed by Julian's legal team alongside notification that assets traceable to her deception were being frozen pending investigation. Genevieve stared numb, with shock, as the reality of her situation crashed down. There were no more corners to hide, and no more manipulations to deploy. The intricate web of lies she had spun for years had finally ensnared her completely. Isabella watched the scene unfold, not with triumph, but with a profound, aching sadness. This woman, bound to her by blood, had chosen envy over love, destruction over connection. As Genevieve was quietly escorted out, Isabella met Julian's and Eleanor's eyes. There was pain there. Yes, but also a shared sense of grim closure. They walked out of the cottage, leaving the flashing lights and the wreckage of Genevieve's life behind them. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of weak sunlight broke through the clouds over the turbulent ocean. They got back into the car. The silence heavy, but different now. Not tense, but exhausted, emptied. The last, most venomous ghost had been confronted and brought into the harsh light of consequence. The path forward was still uncertain, scarred by the truths they had unearthed, but for the first time, it felt clear. The months following the confrontation in Oregon unfolded not with dramatic pronouncements, but with the quiet, steady rhythm of healing. The Devereux estate, once a place of echoing silence and unspoken grief, began to feel more like a true home. Healing, Isabella learned, wasn't a straight line. There were days bathed in the sunshine of newfound family connection, filled with shared meals and tentative laughter. There were also days when shadows lingered, a careless word triggering a memory of foster care, a wave of anxiety washing over Eleanor, a fleeting look of haunted sorrow crossing Julian's face. But now they faced these moments together, armed with open communication, unwavering support, and the quiet understanding that scars, while permanent, did not have to dictate the future. Therapists were consulted, difficult conversations were had, and slowly, painstakingly trust was rebuilt, not on the idealized image of a lost past, but on the complex reality of their shared present. News of Genevieve Martel's legal battles surfaced occasionally. Assets, frozen lawsuits preceding her reputation, in ruins. The family acknowledged it with somber gravity, but they refused to let her plight cast a continued shadow over their lives. Justice was running its course. Their focus now was inward, on forging their own path forward. Isabella thrived. She threw herself into her social work studies at the University of Washington, the coursework resonating deeply with her own lived experiences. She found a powerful sense of purpose, volunteering at a downtown Seattle foster home, the very system that had both failed and sheltered her. One afternoon, sitting with a withdrawn young boy who clutched a worn stuffed animal, Isabella felt a profound sense of connection. She didn't offer platitudes. She simply offered her quiet presence, her understanding gaze. Seeing a flicker of trust in his eyes was more rewarding than any luxury her new life afforded. She was no longer just a survivor. She was becoming an advocate, transforming her pain into a bridge for others. The tentative bonds within the family solidified into genuine warmth. Laughter became more frequent, echoing in rooms that had long been silent. One evening, Julian, perhaps emboldened by time and practice, decided to attempt cooking dinner again. As he proudly presented a slightly less charred version of macaroni and cheese, Isabella eyed it playfully. "Progress, Dad," she grinned. "Do we still need the fire extinguisher on standby this time?" Julian chuckled, shaking his head. "Confidence. Isabella, confidence." Eleanor watched them, her eyes bright with a serene happiness that seemed to smooth away the last vestiges of old sorrows. The easy banter, the shared jokes, these were the bricks and mortar rebuilding their family. One clear autumn day, Isabella found herself drawn back to the edge of the sprawling woods, near where the fateful birthday party had taken place 15 years prior. She stood there for a long time, the scent of pine sharp in the crisp air. There was no fear, no panic, just a quiet acknowledgement of the girl she had been lost and alone. She didn't venture deep, didn't need to. She simply stood at the threshold between past and present, feeling the sun on her face, and understood that this place no longer held power over her. She had walked out of the woods eventually and found her way. Her 22nd birthday arrived not with fanfare, but with the quiet warmth of genuine celebration. Just the three of them sharing a simple, elegant dinner overlooking the moonlit sound. The awkwardness of their first days together felt like a distant memory replaced by an easy intimacy, the comfortable silence of people who belonged together. Julian raised his glass, his voice thick with emotion, but steady. To Isabella, he said, his eyes meeting hers filled with pride and love. "To your strength, your resilience, your incredible heart, to finding your way home, and more importantly, to forging your own future," Eleanor echoed the toast, her smile radiant. "To us," she added softly, "whole again." Isabella lifted her glass, the silver pendant resting against her collarbone. It caught the candlelight gleaming softly. "I used to think this was all I had left of my past," she said, her voice clear and sure. "But it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. It led me through the dark. Back to you." She smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "And now we write the next chapter together." The clink of their glasses sealed the promise, a sound not of dramatic closure, but of quiet, hopeful continuation. Isabella looked out at the dark water, the reflection of the moon shimmering on its surface like scattered diamonds. The road ahead would have its challenges, its complexities. But she was no longer Ava Moreau, the survivor defined by what she had lost. She was Isabella Devereux, grounded by truth, surrounded by love and ready to embrace the future, armed not just with a silver pendant, but with the enduring strength of a family, reforged in the fires of loss and reunion. The peace, she felt, wasn't fragile. It was earned, and it was hers to keep. Isabella's journey reminds us that sometimes the smallest object, like a silver pendant, can hold the weight of a hidden past, becoming a fragile bridge across years of silence and aching separation. It speaks to the quiet symbols of hope we often cling to even when navigating the darkest of times. Her path back home wasn't a simple fairy tale ending. It was a testament to resilience, facing the shock of a completely new reality, confronting the painful sting of betrayal from within her own family, and finding the immense strength needed to heal wounds carved deep by circumstance. Doesn't it make you reflect on the quiet courage it takes to face the ghosts of yesterday and still choose to forge a hopeful tomorrow? Perhaps finding home isn't just about discovering where you came from, but about bravely building where you belong, surrounded by love that endures and understands the scars. This powerful story of loss, improbable reunion, and hard-won peace truly resonated deeply with us. It leaves us thinking about the intricate journeys we all navigate, the hidden truths that shape us, and the undeniable power of human connection against all odds. We'd love to know how Isabella's story touched you. What aspect of Isabella's journey struck you the most? Was it her quiet determination, growing up the shocking moment of revelation, her complex path to healing, or the way justice finally caught up with Genevieve? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. We genuinely value hearing your perspective and connecting through these stories. If Isabella's story moved you or gave you a sense of hope, please show your support by giving this video a like. And if you feel its message of resilience and the enduring strength of family might resonate with someone you know, please consider sharing it with them. For more emotional journeys and stories that explore the depths of human experience, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We'd be honored to share these powerful narratives with you. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. Until next time, take care and keep seeking the stories that connect us all.